All right, what is going on, guys? Wingman Plus back with another video. And today I'm very, very excited. We've got a very special guest. We've got Social Incentive in the house. Ethan, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, man? How's everything going?
Dude, everything's going well. I've been following your page on Instagram for a bit now. Super stoked to have you on board. And why don't you take a moment to kind of introduce yourself and tell everyone about Social Incentive?
Yeah, so I'm Ethan. I started Social Incentive like 3 months ago, and I've just been really focusing on how to gain how to basically implement the mindset of a high value guy into the mind of others, right? So I focus on day game, I focus on social anxiety, confidence, and also as well just getting a bunch of leads so a lot of guys can go on dates with high quality women.
That's awesome, man. And one question I love to ask everyone that like I bring on this channel is what got you into the world of, game, dating advice, self-improvement? Like what kind of got you started on that?
Well, when I was a kid, dude, like I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. I had very bad social anxiety, so I couldn't even ask for the time. Couldn't even talk to my peers. Had no confidence. Whenever I would be in a conversation with my friends, they would just talk all over me, and yeah, I just didn't have it in myself. So I wanted to go on a journey to of self discovery in order for me to gain confidence, not just in myself, but with girls.
That's huge, man.
Yeah.
And one thing I hear a lot of people saying is like, there's this big topic about overcoming approach anxiety. And that's something that I definitely want to get into in a minute here. But what do you have to say to guys who like, in addition to having approach anxiety and talking to girls in public, they just don't really have any confidence like whatsoever. And they have general anxiety about just any kind of social situation. Like, is there a point where a guy should work himself up and kind of like build up his confidence before he kind of worries about approach anxiety and social? Or is that something that should be like focused on part of a bigger picture? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's essentially all about momentum. Whatever environment you're in, you have to socially calibrate to the environment, So it takes a lot of work, honestly. When you first start going out and just approaching random strangers, you're going to get a lot of rejections just based on your energy because you're still trying to figure out how to socially calibrate and as well as to keep a conversation flowing. And I think it's really ideal to not quit in the very beginning of the conversation, but just keep pushing through the initial moments where you feel like there's dips in the conversation. Push through that initially, and you'll just get better. And like I said, you might not be able to start a conversation, or you might not be able to um, basically talk like ramble on like I do. But if you keep on practicing, you'll eventually get extremely good, and it'll be at the point where you'll just be a master class. You'll just be master class, and you'll be able to approach anybody, spike up a conversation whenever at a bar or whatever environment.
Definitely. And one thing I noticed in my own like personal experience is something that made me way more confident. I kind of attribute it to like two major factors. First one was working retail and just working with customers like face to face every day really, really took me out of my shell. Especially like there was a lot of ladies who like, would shop at the mall that I was working at and things like that. So just got a ton of exposure, like talking to women daily. And then the other part of it would be wrestling. So in college, I was like on the wrestling team and just forced me to be in like extremely uncomfortable situations on a daily basis, just physically, mentally, emotionally. Wrestling is an absolute grind. And it's something that gave me, when I walk away from it, I get off the mats and I'm just kind of walking around in everyday life. I felt like a fucking beast, bro. I felt like I could like take any guy with my bare hands, which just gave me a ton of confidence. Would you say that aside from, just going up to girls and approaching them, is there anything else that you would recommend for guys to kind of build up momentum and confidence?
That's a great question, man. There's so many different self-help theories that you can apply. You could meditate, you can, listen to, self-help motivation podcasts, whatever it might be. But I would just say, like, for those people that are relying on um, external motivation, like podcasts, whatever, you have to go out and do it, plain and simple. You have to go out every single day and put yourself in chaotic situations where there's just room for failure so you can grow and learn, right? And the more you put yourself into uncomfortable situations, the more uncomfortable you become, the more comfortable your mind's going to get over time. So That's really what it comes down to.
It's interesting you say that, Ethan, because I feel like there's a couple different schools of thought. One being like, build up a little bit of momentum over time. Like, for example, someone hasn't left the house in a week,
Yeah.
go to Starbucks and just chat up the person making your coffee, right? And then build some momentum there. Would you say there's some merit to that, or are you just saying like throw yourself into the fire and sink or swim kind of thing, and like just go off into the deep end? Do you think that approach is like a little bit better?
It's funny because it's the hardest approach to take because a lot of people just won't do it. They won't throw themselves in the cold water. You can take small steps. You can, pass business cards out. You could start small conversations, do high fives. But the most effective way, if you want to get good at this kind of stuff, socializing, picking up girls, whatever it might be, game, you're going to have to put yourself in really uncomfortable situations. And if you can't push through that, you're never going to get good. And you're never going to learn the social references, the social skills, the do's and the do nots if you don't learn basically calibration and really just like putting yourself out there.
You just got to do it, as Nike once said.
You just got to put your mind to. You can put your once you put your mind to it, you'll get comfortable.
100%, 100%. And would you say, like, as far as having a social circle, having friends that are also interested in like getting rid of approach anxiety and like day game and stuff like that, does that help or hurt to have a bit of a push from friends?
I would say it helps to a certain extent because your friends are only going to give you advice that you need in the moment, right? But there's also that inner voice we all have that tells us, hey, you need to go out and do this. You're going to get that inner voice in your head that tells you, hey, you should do this next time. The best advice you can ever give yourself is really just the advice, your intuition. And your friends are going to give you pretty solid advice, but I would say the best advice comes from yourself. And really, what it comes down to is when you go out and do these initial approaches, when you go out and you overcome social anxiety or whatever fear might be, um, the best way of learning is really just learning from yourself. Really, it's really about you. Your friends will give you opinions about who you should be. Focus on you, and you will succeed.
And what I love, Ethan, is that like you're not just talking out of thin air here. Like I've seen videos that you've made where you'll bring a camera to like a Walmart and put it in a shopping cart and then position it in an aisle all by yourself. Walk up to a girl, like pick her up, get her number, and then go back to your cart and like cart it away. So like you're not somebody who's just talking the talk here. Like you've actually walked the walk.
Right. And I would say just in terms of that kind of content, it's extremely hard to get because not only do you have to calibrate, but you also have to get a good angle on a pickup like that. So yeah, that can be pretty stressful. But a lot of my really good work comes from just day game, just going out solo, and sometimes just going out the wing. Sometimes when my wing bails, I just go out solo anyways. I've been doing it for years, so I have no I just view it as it's just another day, another day to have fun, another day to learn something, and just another day to like get a number and see where it goes. And yeah.
That's cool. So like what do you look for in a wingman? Like let's say you're going out on the town with one of your buddies, like what are some do's and don'ts for all the guys watching who like, want to be a wingman, want to have friends in their corner? What are some like good kind of tactics there? And what are some things where it's like, buddy, what are you doing? Like you're killing me here.
Great question, man. A good wingman always wants you to succeed and they won't cock block you. That's a big misconception is a lot of people think wingmans can just like, steal someone's girl or inject on the conversation. But really what it comes down to is a good wingman knows his role, even though the girl might be slightly more interested into hit what he has to say than from what I have to say. If I'm targeting the one girl, if I'm trying to talk to that one girl. But I would say as well is like someone that's just mentally positive, positive mindset goes a long way. And if he can push through those initial rejections, like in the very beginning, this guy's going to be good. And he's going to level up his dating life. He's going to level up his game. And he'll probably be pulling consistently at the very end of the month if he sticks with it.
100%, man. I think we've all been in that scenario where like you're interested in a girl, you go up with one of your friends and she's kind of feeling him a little bit more.
Well, yeah, and that's a great yes. And you can also do a switch around if that's possible. I do it all the time in set where if I'm talking to a girl and she's not interested, I won't even say anything. I'll just go to the opposite direction, talk to the friend. And 9 times out of 10, dude, you'll find out that it was just like you found the person interesting off the open, and then you found out you had more in common with the other person once the conversation overlaps. And that's where a good wing just says, okay, switch.
Yeah, there's a bit of intuition there,
Absolutely, dude. 110%. Yeah.
eh? And I guess that's just something that kind of comes with repetition. Like over
Yeah.
time, you start to like pick up on those nuances, right?
Yeah, there are little nuances that you'll pick up the more you evolve your game, because you're not going to find things in common with everybody, because not a lot of people consider themselves high value or are high value. But the more you go out and you meet people that are on your level, it will really shine through. And the better you get at this stuff, it's going to be harder to date. Actually, interestingly enough, you can pull more consistently, but in terms of like compatibility, you'll be like right here in terms of your life and where you want to go, and you'll find out some people are still down here.
Hmm. It's a pretty high level problem to have, isn't it?
Yeah, because once you start rolling and start flowing and start evolving your game and just building up your spiritual growth as well over a time, yeah, dude, people are gonna be so out of your wavelength. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, it's a positive thing, because you're reaching a certain high standard to where you can meet those high quality women. And so, like, once you realize you can pull the high quality one, you have to keep on pushing. And I've seen it all the time. Like, people will just quit. They think they're high value, and it's because they are low value. They need to build up their high value status. They need to go out consistently. They need to stop, trying to get validation from other people and get validation from themselves.
Absolutely. And this is something I actually heard Alex Harmozy talking about. Big shout out. I'm a big fan of Harmozy. He mostly does business content, but he does talk about relationships sometime. And one time he was saying that if you think about it, there's 3.5 billion women in the world. And if your goal is to like find your soulmate or find the one, like one that you really want to spend the rest of your life with, it's almost your duty to be insanely picky. Like a girl could check every single box, but there's like one little thing where it's like, I'm uncomfortable about that one thing. And a lot of people would kind of like settle and be like, yeah, but you know what? Overall, it's like a pretty good pick. And he was saying, like, no, like keep going until you find the one that just checks every single box.
Absolutely, dude. It's a process. I can't tell you how many times where I've gone on dates with the girls where I just found out, like, in the very beginning of the approach, we had so much in common. And then right when we went on the date, in the day two and the day three or whatever, we started dating, I just realized this person is not for me. And that's just what it comes down to. Not everyone's going to share the same maturity level as you. So you just have to deal with it in that way and just realize, hey, there's always better. I think the mindset of there's always better and there's always room to improve.
Such a good point. You actually touched on something earlier, and I kind of want to circle back on this because this is actually a question I had for you going into this show. Is you talked about, looking for signs of interest from a woman. And I know, when I'm texting on Tinder or over text, I know there's signs of interest to look for. Like if she's using words and kind of stretching out the vowels or like adding extra letters to a word, if she's using like a lot of haha, LMAO, LOL, a lot of like playful emojis, even something as simple as like matching the size of my paragraph bubbles. Like if I'm
Oh, yeah.
sending a paragraph of 3 lines, she's sending like 3 or 4 lines too. Those are all signs of interest that I would see over text and kind of know like, okay, this girl's into me. What are some of those subtle, nuanced signs of interest when you're talking to a woman like out in public during the day?
Well, I would say number one, she's actually excited to talk to you. She has energy. And I guess when the guys say, well, how do I know? Well, you can kind of tell in the conversation. It depends too. Like if they stay there for a while, they talk to you for more than 15 minutes and you get to the initial hook point, they're interested. If you talk to her and she's laughing at every other, 2 or 3 minutes, she's interested, right? You don't need to be a stand-up comedian. All you need to do is just really just come from a place of flow, and it needs to be controlled within you. So I would say, yeah, there's signs of them looking at you, staring at you, giving you good eye contact, squaring up. If you're leading and you're polling somewhere, and if they go with you, they like you. If they're kind of, I don't want to leave this location and go to another location, they're not interested. So yeah, those are some signs to look out for.
Hmm. Those are all solid, man. And as far as, your initial approach, this is probably when it comes to approach anxiety, the hardest part for a lot of guys. I know it's something that gives me butterflies is once I'm in the conversation, I feel good. But that initial, like, what do you go up and say? Like, what kind of openers, like, how do you break the ice there with a complete stranger? Do you have any tips around that?
Okay, so to be completely honest, um, I'm not really like a pickup guy. So I don't
Sure,
go
sure.
out and pick up girls. I go out and I talk to people, right? And then get girls' numbers and then go on dates. So the reframing of it's important. The more you reframe that in your mind that you're going out to have fun and you're not putting an emphasis on I need to get results, you will get more results. That's kind of how the law of attraction works. So for me, when I go out, it's all random, dude. It's funny. I can turn around a conversation that's going very bad and make it good because my belief system and how I socially calibrate in that situation just turns just turns the best for me, right? Because I'm talking about stuff that they're actually interested in, depending on what she's like. For example, if she's a psychology major, the conversation goes there. She's in the dogs, the conversation goes there. I'm not flipping topics. I'm not rambling on different topics unless it's necessary. Like for example, if I'm talking about, dogs, for example, right? And she's passionate about it. I might talk about dogs, right? And then cut it off when it gets really good. Talk about something else that's not as interesting, and then go back to dogs later. So that's my biggest suggestion.
And what you said, like, I'm not familiar with the law of attraction. It's not something I've like looked into a ton, but there's definitely truth to what you said there. Like, even when it comes to like going out with friends, like going to the club, if you go out with a bunch of guys and they're like, hey, yeah, we're gonna try and like, meet some chicks tonight, it never goes well. Like those are usually the nights where you're like the
Yeah.
four lonely dudes in the middle of the dance floor at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
But when you just go out to have a good time with the boys, grab a couple beers, dance, just kind of see what happens. Those usually end up being like the most legendary nights, the ones where you have the best stories and quite frankly, like where you typically get the most attention from ladies.
Yeah, you're in that situation, you're with your buddies, and you go out and you're trying to pick up girls, right? You have the mentality of trying to pick up girls. I would say the reason why that fails is we kind of talked about the law of attraction is because you're trying. So if you go out with the mentality that you have low expectations, you're basically already setting yourself up for success. But if you have really high expectations, like tonight's going to be a great night, or there's going to be a bunch of girls there, and then it turns out there's no value, or there's not a lot of girls in the environment, then what's going to happen, bro, is you'll see it all the time. Your state will go down. So for me, I'm a huge state junkie. That's the reason why I do like videos, or that's why I do pickup, or I go out and talk to random strangers because of that feeling of, oh man, this is I'm in the flow. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Like I used to do a lot of prank videos too, and it's just something I haven't done in a minute. But I will say, like the momentum that you get from just going out and like interacting with complete strangers, whether it's to troll them, prank them, do like funny pickup videos, something like that, it makes you such a lubricated person socially.
Absolutely. Yeah. Practice makes perfect, man. Really does.
Yeah. And there's a way that like you can become that guy without a camera. Like I have a lot of friends who they almost behave like, YouTubers without cameras. Like when we go to Walmart, like they're just like chatting up old people, like kind of like trolling, like using sarcastic humor and just like keeping like a positive vibe throughout the day. Any recommendations for people who like, they're not like you and me, they don't have camera guys to follow us around to kind of like keep that loose style and kind of create momentum for themselves?
Well, you can either find a wingman that you're like, you have to find someone that you're at least somewhat compatible with. If you go with a wingman that you guys just have nothing in common, um, you're gonna fail every single time. I've went out with so many wingmen that just we didn't flow together well and our sets failed, right? So I would say if you're gonna go out with somebody that you're really compatible with, you'll get success because you'll just go off each other, right? Somebody says something witty and you'll say something witty back. And I think as well in that situation, finding a friend, number one, or number two, going out solo, pushing through the initial 2, 3 approaches, and then finding a friend and saying, hey, dude, I overcame a little bit by myself, but I need a little bit of help.
Okay, so sense of humor is absolutely key when it comes to, attracting the opposite sex and even just making friends. Like having a sense of humor is like the easiest way to let people's guard down, let them know you're chill, you're not a weirdo, and you're a fun person to be around. So any advice for people who have a hard time kind of getting out of their shell? Like, how do you recommend kind of like letting that humor shine through? What gets people laughing? Like, what are some of the things you like to do?
Embrace your laugh. So a lot of people actually don't know that they possess a great laugh, or if it's different. For me, I have a great laugh, so I present it in different a variety of different ways. Whether it's me just like laughing at a joke, I'm all out like Mr. Krabs. That makes a lot of people laugh. So get in tune with like your laughter and your facial expressions and charisma, because charisma and everything else that aligns in your facial mode will present confidence, right? And when it comes to humor and delivery, I have like this system. I do it's the 1 2 step. So it's a lot of comedians use it. They call it different things, but it's basically one thing that's expected, another thing that's expected, and then the last line, like the punchline, not expected. So, for example, like let's take like three things, right? Hot dog, and then you say, another thing that is like hot, right? And then you do hot moms, right? So it's like hot dog, hot, and then hot moms. It's like hot moms, right? That's a lame example,
Mm-hmm.
but you can kind of see how if you say something that's like a little bit different, but just not expected, but crazy, you're gonna get a laughter out of it because that's just like the kind of like the simplistic humor guidelines that
For sure.
comedians apply. So yeah, anyone can apply that. And if you're kind of wondering about humor in general, watch like comedy. Like watching stand-up comedy can help a lot. When I first started going out and started getting in the flow, I would watch like a piece of stand-up every night.
Oh, that's really cool. I actually, for a while, I thought like, hey, it'd be kind of cool to try stand up. And I watched some YouTube videos of like, I did that classic search, how to do stand up comedy, like stand up comedy lessons. And there's actually some really, really good advice on YouTube too, of just like how to kind of get your creative juices flowing, how to get yourself in a mindset where like you kind of let your brain speak freely and you don't think too hard about what you say. I think that's where like most comedians, most great comedians, you can kind of hear them when they're doing like crowd work or they're on a podcast. They can just like quip up the funniest stuff off the top of their head. You're like, how do they come up with these jokes? And I think it's just because they put themselves in a mindset where like they just speak without thinking.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing you touched on earlier as well, and I want to circle back on this, is you mentioned like, guys kind of knowing best practices and like, what not to do and getting that through experience. Based on your experience, what are some common mistakes that just give women the ick, turn them off, make them immediately uninterested?
There's so many, but I would say the common ones are, approaching from behind. You never want to do that. That's really kind of basic level stuff. If anyone approaches from behind, they just have no confidence. I mean, you don't want to do it. I mean, I could pull it off if I wanted to go like that, make what's up, having good energy, but someone has to turn around, right? It's not comfortable. And then I guess some more things, you're right. And it's just guys just talking about, how much money they have. That's a huge thing. Talking about what they own, what car they drive. Girls don't want to hear about the materialistic stuff as much as they want to know about you. And I would say another common one is just being a little bit too persistent when they say like they don't want to, they're not into it and they're just kind of still persisting and kind of just acting like someone they're not. As well as a girl, they're very intuitive, so they can really tell if you're being genuine or not. So if you're faking energy or you're trying to be someone you're not, they're going to reject you. But if you're, I even tell guys, like, if you're nervous, just tell the girl you're nervous. She'll probably be a little bit like, okay, she'll give you some leeway room.
Mm-hmm.
And right, if you go up and you're just like really confident and you're killing it naturally, then the girl will tell by your energy. But yeah, you can't fake it. I mean, you can fake it till you make it. You could try that approach,
Yeah.
but I would say, just get reference experiences first.
I love what you say about telling a girl that you're nervous too, because that's something that I find myself using a lot. Like I find myself if I like sometimes when you're talking to a really pretty girl, like at any level, you can kind of like word vomit, stutter. You could feel like some butterflies. You could feel your heart pounding. And you can almost use that, like circling back on humor. Self-deprecating humor, I find, is like one of the easiest ways to like break down someone's walls. Like when you're not afraid to kind of make fun of yourself and acknowledge like any kind of awkward situation or awkward thing about yourself, it shows that, you're not that guy flexing like, here's my job, here's my car, here's my watch. Like you're so confident that you're able to kind of like tear yourself down a little bit in like a chill and funny way. And I've always found that that goes a long way. So like even pointing out like, I'm sorry, like I'm so nervous right now. Like I don't really see like girls as pretty as you all the time. Like you can even say it in the kind of just like a cheesy way where it's like, you're kind of being sarcastic, kind of like laughing about it, and you can kind of tie the two together where you're showing that confidence and kind of creating a humorous situation about it, and
Absolutely.
being yourself too, like being like open.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with all those points you just brought up. It's really common with a lot of guys. They feel like they have to be someone, right? They have to convey a certain energy or they have to pretend to be a high value guy. But really, the eyes are the lens of the soul, right? So everyone can tell if you're faking it. And I used to fake it all the time, so I would know this. But over time and repetition, it's really about repetition. Um, I'm not a really social guy. I don't go out and just like talk to everybody. I'm really naturally introverted. But the one thing that excites me about going out is just the fun of it. The roller coaster ride, the rejections, the yeses, the pulling, the conversations. Even the conversations can be pretty lit. Depending on what you're talking about. I think another tip too as well, just kind of stay away from like surface level questions. Stop asking things like, "Well, what do you do for fun?" Start like really getting down to really nitty gritty good questions like what are you passionate about, like what wakes you up in the morning, like what do you see in a guy that makes you want to date them, right? What potential is there? And you ask those great questions to have them think, they're going to at least leave the conversation thinking, what, that guy actually had some really good points, and yeah, that's kind of verbal skills 101.
Such an easy way to separate yourself from like 99% of dudes is asking questions like that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
deeper questions always helps.
Now, I've seen a lot of videos of you picking up hot moms. I'd say when it comes to like picking up hot moms on the internet, Ethan's number one.
Absolutely.
So I've got a question. Like, does your approach differ when you're talking to like a hot mom versus say like a college student?
Absolutely. It's so much different. A lot of people think it's the exact same thing. Yes, some rules apply, like confidence is there, verbal skills, knowing when to get the number two. It has to be calculated, I believe for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
in a sense of where they're at in their life, you have to understand an older woman has kids. She has things to do. She has a busy schedule. She has her priorities straight. She knows what she wants. So if you go up to an older woman and you're not confident and you're very nervous and you're like really not sure about it, she's gonna sense that and you'll get rejected really quick. But if you go up and you're sure of yourself, you're confident, you know how to talk to anyone, and you treat them like a normal person, they're gonna be like, okay, this is impressive because 99% of guys treat older women like they're on a pedestal. And that's pretty surface level stuff. But I
Mm-hmm.
would notice one thing that really helps grab their attention is really scheduling, like scheduling, because they're at a point in their life where they actually want someone to fill a time gap, right? Whenever they're like, it could be Mondays, be Fridays, whenever they're available. If they can't find a guy that's willing to put up with those 2 days, um, or in their schedule, they're not going to date you. And another thing as well is bringing up like talking about their kids, not like, hey, I should play baseball with your kid or whatever. That's a little bit too much on the first initial meeting.
Yeah.
But if you get them to talk about and open up about their life and their kids and what they've learned, they're going to be interested.
That's massive, man, because that seems like the biggest one that I think would cause guys a little bit of confusion is like, do I pretend the kid doesn't exist? Do I, try to prove that I could be, a good stepdad for the kid? Do I just kind of keep it chill? And I think that's the best approach is like acknowledge and ask about it out of like a place of curiosity, not a place of like,
Yeah.
some weird tactic to make her like you more.
Absolutely, man. And I would say as well as the flirting and teasing and normalcy of the conversation, right? The three-step method, flirting, teasing, and normalcy. If you have those three things in a conversation and you just recycle them, it's pretty easy. But here's the thing: how can you consistently do it? Every single time. So, like for example, if there's a mom in a grocery store or she's like a cashier, I'll go into the checkout line and I'll start a conversation like, hey, a normal conversation, for example, like, hey, I've noticed like a lot of people are in here in the morning, why is that? And then they'll say, oh yeah, normally it's busiest around this time, etc. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just buying batteries for my business. And they'll be like, what kind of business? And I'll be like, funny business. Right? And I'll just pause
Yeah.
there, get the little chuckle, right? You need the initial laugh, right? Once you get the initial laugh, it opens a gateway of conversation, you know? And once they start talking and start realizing, okay, this guy's just a funny guy, he's not taking anything seriously, they're going to start to open up, and you can actually start to ask probing questions like, okay, what's your, what is your life like? Do you have a dog? Stuff like that, stuff that you wouldn't consider normal. And then you can also tease, like you could be like, hey, you look like this, or something about them, right?
Mhm.
And then they're going to be like, well, they're going to ask questions like, well, why does he think this? And that's the whole fun of it, right? Is meeting someone for the first time, not knowing anything about them, and then figuring out, oh, wait, okay, this guy's got some skin in the game. He knows something. He might perceive me as something that I don't think myself, right? I don't think myself like as that, right? I don't think myself as someone that likes to party. Why does this person think that? What makes this person so entitled to their opinion, right? And so
Mhm.
that really starts the conversation.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm making a video right now. It's actually called picking up a girl at a party, because it's way different than picking up a girl during day game or bars or whatever. It's actually way
Yeah.
more and actually way more realistic too. But I would say the best way to approach a girl at a party is there's so many different ways. But the nuances I learned was actually when I was high, and this was years ago. But the fundamentals and everything I've learned, because I was so consciously aware of what I was doing, that's what made me write things down and be like, okay. So what I've noticed too is like the biggest thing you can do at a party is isolate, right? Because you're like, for example, right? There's a cage, right? There's a cage of lions, tigers, and all, and people have value and people that don't have value. So you're competing in an environment, right? So you're trying to stand out in that environment to basically win, right? Pull at the end, right? So it's a winning circle game. And so at a bar, it's different because a lot of people, they come and go, they might not know you, but at a party, it's like you're in that environment, everyone feels like they know someone, and everyone's affiliated with either a friend or not, right? And so, or they're invited. And so what I like to do is go in the location, right off the bat. And I like to find a spot, right? And I'll give a good example of this. I was flowing. This was last Halloween. I was killing it. And I found a location. It was like outside this house, right? And it was like this bench and like these bushes, right? And it looked really beautiful. Like it was well lit up. And so I was like, okay, mental note. Talking to this girl, and we're vibing, right? And so my friend's there, and we're chatting. He's a good wing. He's actually pretty good at gaming. And so I'm starting to like flirt and tease, and I'm starting to whisper in my friend's ear, right? I'm starting to whisper things and laugh and just like really let loose. And so the girls are like, "What's he talking about? Like, I want to be a part of this, right?" There's an urge, and so it's sucking them in. And so once it sucked them in, I was like, "Okay, it's game over. I'm gonna have to still three-step method, right? Flirting, teasing, and then normalcy, right? And then after the normalcy part, it was funny because once it gets later during the night, there's going to be a little bit more more normal conversation on depth, right? Meaning like about you guys. And
Right.
that's one thing I really noticed is really what leveled up the game is for me is really talking about like, don't be afraid of saying you and me, us, because it's going to show the girl you're a relationship kind of guy. And so what I did was once I got to the normalcy, I got to the very serious questions, and it was like she got to the hook point, I guess, the initial hook point. Then I decided to realize, okay, locations in the backyard. Now you need to isolate, right? Because once you isolate, everything becomes surreal, right? Everything becomes between you and her, and it gets a little bit more romantic as well as other things, right? So I'm outside. I'm like, I basically lead, and I'm like, I need to show you this real quick. This is awesome. This is the best thing ever, right?
I
Something
know a spot.
I know a spot
Yeah.
and adventure, right? And so she's outside of me, and she's like, "What is it?" And I'm like, "Do you see that?" And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, do you see it?" And she's like, "It's all lit up and shit." She's like, excited as fuck. Like any girl would be excited as fuck once she hits the. Remember, she had to hit the initial hook point, and
Mhm.
so we're over there, we're vibing, and I'm doing my best. I'm vibing, I'm killing it. I'm really killing it actually at this point. And she left once we were leaving. It was already in my control of basically, should I pull? Should I just get the number? What am I going to do? And so I would say the biggest tip for a lot of guys is when you first, well, there's a lot of big tips, but when you first enter an environment where there's alphas, betas, and like just a variety of different kind of females, you have to remember, don't talk to the female the whole entire time, right? Talk to her for like 15 minutes, talk to someone else, talk to other girls in the environment. That doesn't hurt. If anything,
Mhm.
you talking to other girls is going to make them more interested. A lot of people actually say the complete opposite, right? They say, okay, no, you just proves that you're a flirt. But from what I've noticed, uh, you will be talking to a girl and she'll be interested in you, and then you'll be giving attention to another female. It just spikes their interest because they
Oh,
want to be a part.
100%.
They want to be a part of
Who is saying otherwise? Who are these
well,
people? Who are these people
well,
saying
there's
otherwise?
well, there are some people. Well, there are some people in the forums that say this is the wrong way, this is the right way. But anyways, yeah, it spikes their attraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so once it initially spikes their attraction and they're really into that, like they're into that conversation, they're like, oh man, like I want to talk to you next. I want to talk to them next. If you get to that point, game over. But remember
Whoa.
this, absolutely. But remember this, a lot of guys fail to understand how to play the game. They talk to the girl the whole entire time, and the girl will lose interest, right? Your job in the very beginning of meeting anyone is to keep a balance between they're still being interested and then them kind of still being curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
What builds attraction and what makes someone like you is a curious factor. It's the mystery, right? So if you cut it off in those conversations, in those moments, but you leave on a positive note, but you're still in the environment of, like, for example, you're talking to a girl and then you're like, okay, I got to go real quick. Or, hey, can
Yeah.
you go over there real quick? We got to talk. And you talk to your friend. You're making it about you and your friend, right? And she doesn't know what you and your friend are talking about, but she knows it's about her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't know and she's curious. So there's already like a curious factor there. And it gets in the chase. Why? Because it gets in the chase because they're like, this has never happened to me before, especially in an environment where I know people. But at the same time, is now it's a game because they have to chase and keep pursuing. That's where a lot of guys fail, is they fail in those moments where you have to think smarter, not work harder.
This is such a golden nugget, man. Wow.
Yeah.
That is like such valuable and tangible advice.
Yeah, dude.
Man,
Yeah. I would,
I'm learning so much right now. Like what else have you got, Ethan?
oh, dude, I got a lot more. I would say another thing as well is in an environment, right, where there's alphas, and when I say the term betas, I'm not like putting anyone down
Right.
because there's going to be people in the environment, especially at a party or bar, that aren't approaching, number one, and number two, they're just standing around. Okay. And that are just not doing much. So those people you don't have to compete with. So now the question is this, right? In an environment where there's a lot of value, how am I going to be competing, right, with the people that have high value, right? The alphas. Well, here's the one thing that you can do, right? You have to have high energy, right? So what does this mean? So people mistake high energy and high intensity, whatever you want to call it, as different things. For me, my high energy is I'm always working. So let's say you're in an environment with 20 girls. Okay. Your job is to see what is there with 20 girls. Your job isn't to talk to one or two, right? Because it's a hit or miss. Mm-hmm. Your job is to talk to everybody in that environment, right? Get to know them and do the 3-step method: flirting, teasing, normalcy, and a little bit of pushing and pulling. The pushing and pulling is, hey, we need to talk real quick. Go stand in the corner. A little playful, demanding shit, right? A little playful, kind of just playful humor. And as well as you're controlling the environment, right? And alpha, he knows where things should go. He's dominant, right? A lot of guys are really like nitpicky and like they're very like scared about, oh, if I say this, I'm gonna get rejected, or if I do this, it's not gonna work out. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, if you just take the leadership role and you just lead, they will follow. Why? Because the dynamic works that way. You have an alpha in the group, and then you have people following the alpha, right? It's not the other way around. Right? It doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine or masculine. It doesn't matter. The dynamic works the exact same. So you really got to understand simple female psychology. And really what it comes down to is psychology of a female. They want to chase, but they don't want it to be easy. Why? Because think about in the caveman days, dude. Like, yes, they were getting a lot of value. They were getting a lot of food. And they were just enjoying it, right? They were just like, okay, lazy. And I'm not saying girls are inherently lazy. That's more of like an Andrew Tate thing. I'm not saying that at all, but back to like human evolution, that's what was going on. Was guys were going out and they were going out and getting the food and they were bringing it back, right? And the girls were actually doing other things, raising the kids, nurturing. Those are things that naturally happen in society. That's normal, right? So what happens in an environment like that is you need to make sure that you're in a position where you have 3 to 4 or 5 girls that know who you are and know exactly what you're there for, and you're controlling them, and you're being funny, and you're flirting with all of them at the same time, to where 1 or 2 or 3 girls are going to notice that they're on rotation to where they're competing, right? So the whole competing stage is a long process, right? And this is one thing my mentor told me a long time ago when it comes to picking up girls and stuff, was very specific. He said, in an environment when you have two or three girls flirting with one guy, that's ideal, right? Depending on the ratio. But if the ratio, let's say, is 20 to 10, which normally at a party, if you're smart and you set it up that way, you're golden, right? But you have to remember, when you're in the rotation series, right? When you have 4 or 5 girls you're talking to at the party, one of them is going to chase more. Why? Because one of them is going to want it more. There's always an alpha female in the group that people don't understand. There's one person going to chase more. So, really, what it comes down to then is just like stripping them from validation, and there's stages within the night. You don't want to be too much, but you don't want to be too little. But you do want to make sure that you actually know who's more interested, right? Number one, who's more interested in you? And number two, who's actually willing, who has logistics, right? Logistically, who's more available? It's in your favor, right? So who's gonna basically be the one to leave with you, maybe, right? Who doesn't have work tomorrow? That's a big thing too. Yeah, that's one thing I've realized too, is like logistics too. Like 90% of guys, the reason why they don't pull is at a party or like in day game, is because they just think it's impossible actually. If a girl's interested in you and you're talking to her for more than 50 minutes and you're doing this stuff, especially in an environment where it's competing, which is the best possible scenario, you're gonna pull.
Dude, you nailed it on the head when it comes to logistics. And this is something I see time and time again with a lot of my clients when they come to me with like their text and they're like, hey, why are girls flaking on dates? It's like girls really bail for two reasons. Either A, they're just not high interest. They're not motivated enough to actually show up to a date with you. Or B, you're just not setting up dates that logistically make sense. Like a lot of guys get the number and they're like, okay, they get right into plan mode. Like, okay, next Friday, let me pick you up. We'll go to this bar and we'll get dinner. And girls are like, well, I'm out of town next weekend. Like, I can't. And then the guy kind of like falls on his face because he didn't take the time to understand what her logistics are like, what her schedule is like. Does she live between, two cities? Does she drive? Whereabouts in town is she? Like, there's so many factors that affect a date actually coming together. And if you don't take the time to like figure out her logistics, you just throw out plans, you're gonna look like an idiot. The same thing applies, as you just said, like at a party or a club or even a day game environment.
Yeah, parties, day game. That's really what that's what I'm really good at. I would say what I'm lacking right now, and is just in general, is like I don't go on dating apps really. I meet everyone in person. Dating apps for me, or I'm not really familiar with the platforms as much, just because I'm not really on Hinge or Tinder or Bumble. But I can tell you, from same rule applies to anyone that is making like quote unquote excuses about trying to build value. You're like, this, right? Like your profile needs to look not only like you have value, but you need to actually you need to look like this girl can easily go on a date with you. Like I asked myself that too, is like, if I was talking to myself, would I want to date myself, basically? But this is perception. It's like,
and like these dating apps put out statistics where they say women swipe right on like over 80% of the profiles they come across. And there's a lot of really negative people who leave comments on my videos and they say, yeah, women find 80% of men ugly, so there's no point trying. I'm not in the top 20% of looks. And they're actually misinterpreting that stat. So women aren't swiping left because they find 80% of men ugly. Like mathematically, that's impossible. 80% of men can't be below average. Literally 50% of men are below average. But what happens is you get so many guys who maybe they're a 7 out of 10, but their profile makes them look like a 2 out of 10. Like they have such low quality photos on their profile, just massive red flags where, they've got like their ex-girlfriend half cropped out. They've got the fish photo. They've got like a selfie in their car with like a weird mustache from Movember. And they've got like the shirtless mirror selfie with the toothpaste and a urinal in the back. And like, why aren't girls swiping on me? Like, why am I not getting any matches? And it's like, bro, you're breaking every rule in the book here. It's such a big thing where like, I feel like a lot of guys, because I think the internet has changed us and made us so used to instant gratification, where we almost just expect everything to be free and easy. rather than just put in like the bare minimum level of effort to like look into why you're not getting the results and just make a few simple changes.
Absolutely, man. And I think when it comes to verbal game, you kind of hit it on like the kind of hit it on the head, hammer on the head, but it's like the dopamine spikes, right? It's like if I compliment someone or if I give them instant gratification, they're going to get a dopamine spike, right? And they're going to feel validated. They're going to feel great. But if you strip them from validation, right, which only happens when you should only do that when you're talking to a hot girl, is because then she's like, well, I'm normally getting compliments. What makes this guy different? Why am I not getting a compliment from this guy? Right. So it's a reward thing, right? So for example, in psychology, it's like for example, if you're training a dog and the dog does all the work, right, and you don't reward the dog, it's not worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you just train the dog and no, yeah, so you have to reward the dog with a treat or whatever it might be to go through the obstacles. It's the same thing with game, and even talking to girls, right? Because if you strip them from validation, chasing, compliment, they deserved it, right? So, and it's kind of crazy how that's that's like high level, right? When you get high level like that, where you can talk to somebody and you can chat them up, and then all of a sudden they can say something, and you can say something witty, and then all of a sudden they have a comeback where they're like, okay, well, because remember, people are gonna take a compliment two ways. One, a genuine, like it's genuine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or number two, it's a playful kind of thing, right? You're not serious. Those two things are great. Complimenting someone that thinks it's playful is great, and then complimenting someone that thinks it's serious or it's genuine is great. But I've realized the more you don't have a really genuine compliment, and the more they're going to chase. Why? Because then they're searching for this genuine compliment. They're like, okay, like for example, tell me you love me, right? And then the guy's like, I love you. And it's like the girl's like, what the fuck,
Yeah.
right?
It's
So
or you know what another thing you could do too is like find on her outfit like the one thing that's kind of off and then
yes,
compliment that.
no, exactly.
Like it's kind
Because
of toxic, man, but it's like in
well,
Pokemon terms,
people
it's super effective.
100%, because a lot of people don't understand female psychology, right? Now we're still talking about things that go back way back then, right? Back in the caveman days, dude. Like we were saying, they were nurturing, they were getting value, they were picking and choosing who they wanted to be with. It's essentially the same thing. A girl's only thinking this. She's thinking, what does this guy have that makes me feel good? Right? Because they're always taking value, right? What makes me feel good? What makes me want to, wake up in the morning and feel like I deserve this? A girl wants to, the reason why girls like to chase is because they want to feel like they deserve something. Same with a guy. A guy doesn't want something extremely easy, but what a guy wants is something that is super compatible and something sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they look at long-term goals way more than a girl would, right? Just because a guy's like, okay, a guy actually is like at a certain point wants to settle down. He wants a wife that only wants him. He doesn't want his wife going to the bars. But a girl, right, it's kind of interesting, right? You get the whole dynamic of it. But a guy, let's say a guy goes out to a bar, right? A guy's at a bar, the girl freaked out, right? But a girl goes to a bar, you don't get to freak out. Why? The
It's
same dynamic,
insecure.
insecurity, right? It's
Yeah.
same dynamic. They're like, well, like you should be like a girl's natural state in that environment. It should be a natural resting, nurturing state, right? So seeing that perspective where a guy's going out and killing it, and then they're like, what the heck's going on? Is because they're realizing that, oh my God, I have so much to lose here, because if I lose this guy, like I can lose so much, right? So that's what a high value guy is. If they didn't care about you and you weren't high value, they wouldn't care if you went out. But the fact that they care, that you're going out and, maybe talking to other girls and flirting, they're like, okay, he's high value. So once a girl understands your high value, she'll do anything. That's why, unfortunately, you see the whole like Andrew Tate message, and this can be taken out of context, but you see the whole like message of like, if a girl loves you, she'll do anything. She'll even kill a man for you or hide a dead body. That can be true, yes. But why is that true? Because you have to understand, there's so many people in this environment that are not high value, to where if a girl wants to be with you, out of all the men that are out there, you have to understand that's rare. Like a girl has so many options, but for her to be with you is like a big plus. It's like a big, like, yeah, I want to be with you. I want to marry you. I'm a guy. I mean, he can go up to any girl in game, right? But a
Mm-hmm.
girl is going to be a little bit more like on the receiving end. Like, okay, do I like this guy? Do I not? Like, and that's why guys have to work so hard for a date. That's why guys have to work so hard.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
a lot of women don't understand that dynamic. It's super interesting. So
Yeah, they're emotional.
I give dating advice to guys. That's like my audience. I don't really focus on giving dating advice to women. And the problem that the average guy has is like, okay, how do I put myself in a position where like I can actually get dates? A lot of guys are just coming from a place of insane scarcity. Probably like over 90% of men
Yeah.
are don't have the dating life that they want. They couldn't call someone and have a date within the next week. Whereas women have the opposite. They come from such a place of abundance where like the average girl could literally throw up a Tinder profile and within one day have hundreds of matches. And there's videos of this on YouTube you can check out. And that's why like when women say like what I sometimes I tell girls what I do. I'm like, yeah, I help guys with Tinder. Like I give them Tinder makeovers and stuff. They're like, why would anyone need that? Like what do you mean? Like Tinder's easy. Like I have like 400 matches a day. Like what are you talking about? And it's just they're only dealing with it's funny. I have friends who give dating advice for women, and the issues that they confront are not, okay, how do I get more dates? It's how do I make a guy stay?
Yeah.
And it's because they're only being exposed to really the top 10% of guys. And that's a very high level problem. Is like, how do I make these guys who are the only guys with options stick around? It's the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Yep.
And I find it so fascinating. And it's kind of crazy where like it's easy to take stuff out of context when you're giving dating advice to men if you don't understand what, the vast majority of men are dealing with on the dating market today.
Absolutely, man. And that's really what we addressed earlier was just that dynamic of like, yeah, how can I make this guy stay? Why is he going out? What is he doing? Like, I'm so confused. Why does he need to go out? He should be at home, helping with the kids, with the family. So, why is he hunting right now? Right. So it's really comes down to that dynamic, dude. And I see it a lot of times, guys will be out, they'll be at the bars, they'll be at the party or whatever. And they just cannot fit that dynamic. They can't even work around that dynamic. It's almost like they have no clue on what builds attraction. And for me, what I've noticed, what really gets someone's interest is just a range of expressiveness. Could be, using your hands, your facial mode, facial expressions, energy, whatever it might be, because you have to remember psychology, female psychology, and what happened in the past. Yes, that's still prominent, but we're in a new age right now, dude, where like social media and like attention spans are like 5 seconds, and it's conditioning the human mind. It's conditioning our consciousness. It's poison dripping our consciousness, right? So that's another thing I've learned is like when you're out and about and you're working on these skills, perfect them. You know what I mean? Because the more you perfect these skills and really learn about people's attention spans, and like really interesting fact, a goldfish is 9 seconds. A normal human's like 5. So we've actually, yeah, we're
man.
Goldfish.
Shout out to TikTok for that one.
TikTok for sure was a factor.
Ethan, man, I feel like this has been an absolute value-packed interview. I guess like closing thoughts, what do you have to say to the average guy who's watching this video right now?
Ask yourself this question. What's the worst thing that can happen if you don't try? What's the worst thing that can happen if you don't make a move or ask your girl out on a date? The worst thing that's going to happen, guys, is that you just get rejected, right? And living regret's the worst feeling. So you don't want to live with regret. You want to just chase your dreams. So chase your dreams, guys. Go for what you want, and be alpha. Really, that's what it comes down to, man.
Ethan, man, social incentive. Thank you so much for coming on, buddy. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to put a link to all of your socials down in the description of this video. But just for everyone watching this, like, where can they find you?
Dude, you can find me on Instagram, social incentive, social_incentive. You can find me on YouTube, just social incentive. And my other links of my prank videos and my picking up mom videos, like you've heard before, Sus Dudes, SUSTUDES.
Hell yeah, buddy. Ethan, thank you so much for coming on, man. This is something I think we should do regularly. Like, I think people are going to absolutely love this video. So super stoked that you're on board with it.
Bro, can't wait for it to come out, man. Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, brother.